This episode of the Council of the First Ones was recorded on May 31st, 2020.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Council of the First Ones. I'm Kelly. Joining me today is my friend Rene. Hi, Rene. How's everything going?
Oh, I'm doing really well, Kelly. How you doing?
Countdown to the end of school.
Oh, I'm already on vacation, so slightly better off, but you will.
Yeah, figuring I only have, 7 days left. The earliest I've ever gotten out. Also joining us today is our friend Dave. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, guys.
And we also have Sean joining us today.
Hey, glad to be back, everybody.
And I'd like to introduce our guest today, Tim Seeley. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm alive, and that's about as much as one can say. But I'm happy to be with you guys as a little distraction from the world.
Oh, you provided a very good distraction this week to all of us with the conclusion of Masters of the Multiverse.
Well, I'm glad.
I know
I'm glad it
I
worked.
couldn't put it. It was worth waiting for.
Yeah, we were about a month late, I think, maybe a little more, almost 2 months late, I think. And I had painted those action figures and stuff, so I was all ready to go. I was excited to debut this, and then I was like, oh well, 2 months off. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we get into it, I'm kind of curious. Did they notify you that all the comic books? I mean, there was a time where people panicked. Were you told earlier, or were you told with the rest of us?
I mean, we found out basically just as everybody else did, and it was kind of a weird thing, if only because I think DC, all the companies handle it differently, and DC was sort of like, oh no, we're good, we can still put stuff out. Marvel had a different situation, and smaller publishers had different situations, but DC was sort of still ready to go, and then when the distribution shut down, that's something they couldn't do anything about. And now they've sort of changed their approach, and they're doing stuff with different distributors as well as Diamond, which is now reopened. But it was just there was just no way to know for sure what was going to happen, because everybody was doing a different thing. And I mean, it's the same story as the rest of the country, pretty much. Is there's never any sort of good infrastructure left over, because everybody sort of pilfered it. So there's no, everybody's kind of left to do their own thing because there's no plan. And that was the case with the comic book industry as well, because the companies had kind of made their deal with Diamond. We're happy to get the money without any sort of backup of how this would be done without them. And, so I'm glad it's back. I hope it heals up and people can get their comics again.
Well, we want to point out, too, before we get into it, that spoiler warning. Okay, we got to put the spoiler flag. We are freely talking about issue 6 and freely talking about, well, since it's the last issue, we're freely talking about everything and anything. So thank you for being with us. And I'll start with the usual question that we started with this. And I can't believe I've talked to you 6 times already. Where are we in issue 6?
So issue 6 picks up really right after the end of issue 5, but we saw in the end of issue 5 that Keldor, ends up back in Anti-Eternia, basically inside Castle Hellskull, but he's lost his guides. He no longer has, the Tappers of Grayskull He-Man, and he's also lost the 1987 movie He-Man, who were kind of his guides on this. They've both died in trying to fight Anti-Eternia He-Man, or Anti-He-Man as we'll call him because it's shorter. And so Keldor is now goes through the portal from the sort of savage world of the mini comics He-Man and ends up back in Castle Hellskull, which is his home world. And he's been pretty permanently changed by this journey. He's had encounters with all these different Skeletors, and he's also had a lot of things done to him that seem to be indicating that he will become Skeletor.
And you took us on this hero's journey, and I really like how we went full circle, and you followed that formula. And so one thing I was curious about was when we finally saw all the villains we had, I was surprised that they weren't villains, they were victims. Was that always the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that was one of the things that we talked about when I talked to Rob David about this, and we had a kind of a story meeting about this, and they had some really good ideas about it, and really changed kind of the direction of the story. But one thing we kept from the beginning was this was a story about someone becoming worthy of being He-Man, right? That was but it was going to be disguised as a story about someone being corrupted into becoming Skeletor, right? That was the sort of disguise of the story. But also the thing I kept saying was like, this has to feel in the end like the goodness of the Filmation cartoon wins, right? Like we can't be ashamed of any of that sort of stuff. In the end, that goodness of that cartoon wins. That sort of sweet moral thing that they had going with that cartoon that probably seems silly now. That has to be what wins the day, right? And so that was the approach, and everyone was cool with that. And that's definitely how we kind of set up that ending, was just, these people were used. It's darker because comic readers tend to expect that sort of thing now, and everybody's older. That's fan of Master Universe probably. So there's dark stuff in it. And to some degree, like, we're kind of almost sort of doing a satirical approach to that almost. But in the end, I just felt like it should be good. It should be, about redemption and about saving people and about all the things that I think a He-Man comic is supposed to be about, really. It's sort of the moral trappings of Superman placed over Conan plus Flash Gordon. Like the construct of that character had to be intact.
Well, I always found, I just wanted to follow up because that's where I found this. This is where my perception of Hellskull and the anti-universe, because I thought it was more cut and dry, anti-He-Man, evil He-Man. And you had evil Tila, which we saw in that issue, and she ate people. She ate widgets.
She did, yeah. Yeah, she did. And the sorcerer she ate. Jesus.
Yeah, that's the part that I was just shocked. They roasted. I want to say you did it. You did it.
Or
you
at least
roasted
they said
this.
it. Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
They certainly said they did that. Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, wow, the ramifications that it became a little more complex. Instead of them just being the evil versions, they were.
Sorry, I might have missed you. We just gotta. Yeah, I apologize. It's crazy as the world. I might have missed the last couple sentences because we just got a CY alert in Chicago here about a lockdown. So I had a big buzz in my ear. So I apologize. I think I missed. Yeah. Well, this is where we are right now. So I might have missed just the last 10 seconds.
So I was mentioning that I thought that, well, the point I was getting to, that I thought it was a pretty straightforward, these were just the evil versions. And that's how I took it as. And I'm dealing with ramifications in that last issue that you exposed them, that they were corrupted. They weren't evil. They just became that anti-versions. And, that Tila ate people. And yes, they roasted this. I'm going to take them at their word that they did it. And and then the other part is like they have to deal with the things they've done.
Yeah.
And you kind of left that at them, that they have to live with that. Mm-hmm. And I just kept thinking, wow, you really messed these people up.
Well, I mean, so, and part of the thing, the tradition of this kind of anti-version, in the evil mirror universe, is that the people, they are just inherently bad, which I think is a terrible message and not a Master of the Universe message, right? Like, it works for Star Trek, and the sort of where the trope comes from is Star Trek, but obviously comics have picked it up, and all kinds of sci-fi stuff has done that sort of thing. It's not original, obviously, but but like the idea that the world was just bad didn't work for me as a Master Universe story. So I had to change it. I like the conceit of like a corrupted He-Man. That was interesting to me. And we spent a lot of this time explaining how the power of Grayskull itself is corrupted, and it's not the fault of these people. It's the fault of these sort of outlying dark gods that changed them and changed He-Man, basically, right? He was in this world when He-Man finds the power of Grayskull and turns into He-Man. It's a bad thing, right? It's this, we show at the end, we show the Adam that took this because he didn't want to just be a bumbling prince. He wanted to be more, which makes him. That's what makes him the opposite of the He-Man of the other worlds, right? The other He-Man is more like Keldor in this. He was trying to avoid responsibility, and then, he had to take it on and become a hero. And in this one, this Prince Adam wanted power, and when he got it, it corrupted him, and that's the flaw of this world. That these sort of evil entities had been trying to exploit for the entire existence of the universe. So, but I just didn't think it worked to say, like, in this world, in a He-Man story, that everyone just be bad and you just accept it because they're opposites. I didn't think it worked, but I did like the idea that if He-Man in this world was evil and this sort of conquering bad guy, that these other characters like Beastman and Evil Lyn and Trapjaw, that they would fight against that, and that would make them good guys, right? Like they would basically become the Palace Guard, and they would, because I think most of them, in the stories that exist, like they're all sort of sympathetic bad guys, really. You like all of them. They do bad stuff, but they're on the opposite side. Triclops and Trapjaw are basically mercenaries. Beastman is sort of a slave. They're all characters that could be good people, probably, and even Evil Lyn, like, her various stories, she could, there's potential for all those people to have been better people. And if we're going by the sort of Filmation He-Man cartoon as the overlying structure, there was this great story of the Christmas special when I was a kid, where you see Skeletor is like almost a good guy there, right? Like it just seemed like that was the message of the brand, and it didn't seem right to do it a different way. It did. I could darken it up because of the way people acted because they were influenced, but I couldn't darken it up by just being like cynical about everything.
Well, it's a fantastic twist that, like, wow, that formula, you took it and you humanized it, and that in itself became a plot twist. To say, no, it's not really the typical anti or mirror universe story. Haha.
Yeah, and I think I guess the hardest thing about doing some of this sort of stuff too is that everybody thought I was doing this sort of standard thing, and so when it didn't go to their expectations earlier, they were like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And sometimes people would be upset, like, because they expected me to go a certain direction, like that I was going to do it this very tropey way, this standard way. And sometimes you just want to be like, no, I'm not going to, but I can't tell you that. I have to let you figure it out. Nice. I don't want to get in the way of the story. Like my job is to make the story work. That's it. That's my job. And I can't tell you how to read it. So
yeah, I kept hearing, oh, it's a Spider-Verse series, and so they had those expectations, and which in the end, I mean, it's totally fine what you did, and brilliant. Really, I loved it.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
And I was the ending totally caught me off guard. Really, honestly, I mean, it made my whole week. It was just amazing. I love it, and how it wrapped up at the end too. It was just like it filled me with joy. I love it.
Well, I like how you mentioned He-Force. And you kind of you joked around that it was kind of a hokey name, but that was the part I really enjoyed, that you saw all these characters. And were they your invention, all these different characters? I know you grabbed some
Yeah.
other ones that we know about, but did you just thought of all these people?
Yeah, I mean, basically I took the idea that I took it from the previous Masters of the Universe series, which was the Eternity War, and at the end of Eternity War, the King He-Man character in that, because Eternity War very much is a contained Masters of the Universe continuity that sort of ends, it wraps up in itself, and then when we did He-Man Justice, we used a different sort of He-Man, sort of a distilled version of Masters of the Universe, not a modernized one, but a very distilled version. And then the approach here was like, well, let's use all that stuff. And I wanted to use King He-Man from the Returning War story, but it couldn't be his story. That story ends, so it had to be a different, different approach. But I liked how the end of Returning War is King He-Man's. It's a great ending. It basically is King He-Man is forging a sword, and he says basically at the end, okay, I've done my part, and now I'm giving the power. You have the power, and it's this great. That's obviously the message of the whole Masters of the Universe brand. That's what you were doing as a kid. You're playing with He-Man and taking the power for yourself, right? But the follow-up of that wasn't directly addressed. Who did he give that sword to? And so we picked this up as saying, that's why Attorney He-Man couldn't find that He-Man, because he had spread the power out among all these other people. And, Filmation He-Man and Man-at-Arms and Orko, they did find him, and because they used their own key. And then he had basically trained this next generation of people who were worthy of the power of He-Man. So when he gave them that power, he basically spread out the powers that came with the sword, which includes, battle armor and power punch, thunder punch, and the flying fists and the laser light power. He basically
all the
gave
variant
those
powers.
to other people. Right, all the variant powers.
Cool.
And he gave them to these people, but they were all, people who were worthy, and obviously that's a story for another day. But one of the things that Rob and I had talked about was, Masters Universe is so popular with so many people now who at the time didn't sort of have their own, a character that looked like them, right? There was just mostly, the people who were flesh colored were white people, except for Clamchamp and I guess Jitsu and Ninjor, but everyone else was a white person or some kind of alien. And we thought it would be really cool if there was people who were worthy of being He-Man who were all kinds of, diverse flesh tones. That's somebody who was a little kid, a Latin American kid, or a black kid, or a woman, or whoever could see a He-Man for themselves, basically. And so that's why, we approached it that way. And so I did make up all those characters, but they're all based on, sort of things about Masters of the Universe that I was inspired by. The character Zack is actually the first, when I was a little kid, I did a drawing of a Battle Cat He-Man called Zack, which is why his name is Zack, even though it's goofy as shit. But I figured it would totally be a thing they would have made. And so there's that. And then I did,
Cool.
I sort of homaged myself because I thought it was funny. But I also thought it would totally be a name they would use. And then, Hira, or Hira, she's got the Thunder Punch thing. She's sort of designed to have Asian features. And then there's He-Sol, which is the black character. And he looks, sort of inspired by a guy I met at PowerCon who's a black Master of the Universe cosplayer. And he asked me to put a black He-Man in a story someday, and I said I would.
Oh, wow.
And so I owed it to him. And then
there you go.
and then the widget one is Hero, and then the character Valentina is named after my daughter Valentina, because I figured someday she would want to have a Master of the Universe in her name, and she sort of she has like Hispanic features. She has black hair and brown skin.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the approach I took to it. And then there's also almost forgot the other guy, He's got the laser light one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Platino, and that's also a reference to the Argentinian Master Universe line, Fuerza
Oh,
T,
wow.
which had a character named Platino. But he also sort of appears, Latin. Obviously, there's no Latin America in Eternia, so he's not Latin American, but he appears that a brown skinned character. So I just wanted, the world to have their own He-Mans that look like them.
That is so amazing. I just love that so much. And yeah, it's cool that you're giving us this background, this this insight into these characters. Oh, and the cosplayer you're referencing for everybody, his name is Demetrius Holt, and he posted a really cool video where he sat down and he spoke about this appearance of his character, in this inspired character in your comic. And I thought that was very, very special.
Yeah, I was, that to me was sort of the, because we can't use his costume, and he created that, and Mattel can't do that sort of thing. But, I could be inspired by him, and I sat next to him at one of the PowerCons, and he looks amazing, and he's a super nice guy, and so I try to do it as an homage to him, as well as an homage to Sunman, which when I was a kid, those were the Olmec toys, which were sort of a He-Man-esque line, but they were all people of color. And when we were kids, we loved those figures. They were so hard to find. We had a couple of them, but we were a bunch of white kids in central Wisconsin. We're probably the only ones buying those Sunman figures because there was no people of color in my hometown. But so I thought, there should be a little homage there. So that's where the Soul Sun thing comes in.
I see. Very cool. Huh. Wow. I just love the plethora of references in this series.
Well, I love the vampire character. I don't want to name, because I know was there a copyright issue with the vampire character you had?
No. So that's created by Penny Dreadful. She's a former moderator. So we actually figured it out because we talked to her about it. As far as I understand, because she submitted it to the character contest, she was totally fine with it being Mattel. So Mattel technically can own that original design. And this may be not exactly right, but we wanted, she had asked about that character appearing in something, and we were like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity. So that's the Countess, a character that she created. So
the Crimson Countess, evil vampire of Castle Talak. And I spoke with her. I spoke with her just the other day, and she's thrilled. She's absolutely thrilled about this, and rightfully so, that her character is now, a kind of like this official character in the comic book series. So very awesome of you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure, obviously, to expand the world, and I always look for those opportunities to do that. I think a huge part of Master Universe, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is what you add to it, right? Because to some degree, those characters are just iconic templates. You can, no kid when we were kids played with them the same way, and if you decided Clawful was a good guy because you liked him so much, then Clawful was a good guy. And that, I think that part of those figures is so important, and is definitely part of everything that is associated with the brand, is that people add themselves to these characters, and they make up their own characters, and they kit bash stuff. And we were kids, we used to, if a toy broke, or if we found an extra one or something, we were going to customize them, and certainly, like, sometimes we liked the knockoff Master Universe characters more than the ones from the official toys, because they didn't have a story, and we could put our own on it, So, I think that's so much part of the brand.
Nice, wonderful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I just love every time I see some really cool custom character. Yeah, you're right that people put themselves into this brand, into Masters of the Universe in every way. So yeah.
Well, the one thing I was trying to grasp, and that I got it from the beginning, when you mentioned throughout the earlier issues anti-truth and all that, and I kept thinking, well, the opposite of truth is lies. I mean,
Yeah.
I kept trying to think
Subtle.
that, yeah, and I just kept thinking, was that always your plan? Like there was always like some kind of dark dimension, like with the demons. I mean, that's the part I was always trying to wrap my head around with that issue. The dark demons from these issues, are they just dark dimension demons? What was the idea behind those?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on stuff in the original mini comics where they talk about, Skeletor sort of serving these dark gods and stuff. It was in some of the DC comics. It's mentioned the old ones. So, I was just kind of picking up something that existed in the mythos for sure. And it's certainly like a part of Mass Universe. It's sort of a fusion of, Conan and like all these pulp sort of science fiction stuff like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. And so, obviously the sort of Lovecraftian God thing is inherently kind of part of that too. And there's episodes of the cartoon that sort of have these weird interdimensional dark god monster things. And I think the 2000 X cartoon, the Mike Young one, also mentions that. So I just assumed that was this bigger force behind all of this was some kind of, malicious otherworldly gods. And that's why in issue 5, we really get into that with, and I saved that for the pulpiest version, right? The mini comics version is the most Conan pulpy version. So that was the place to sort of go into those dark god kind of ideas. So, it was something sort of added to degree to the mythos because it's not something that has been dealt with in a lot of the other stuff, but it's definitely implied. So now I assume that anytime if you're watching the 2000X cartoon and you go, oh, they just mentioned like some interdimensional demon gods, you're like, oh, that was those guys, like Serpos and all that for some part of that.
Yeah, I really dig that. I like the tentacle monsters, the dark gods actually coming at the He-Force at the end. Yeah.
Well, I did get the Cthulhu vibes and all that coming from him, and that's why I was reminded, I forget the episode, but 2000X, where we saw black tentacles rise and Evil Lynn was going to, I forget the episode. There's always somebody who knows.
The Ties That Bind?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those.
Yeah, and I always was impressed with that, and I always liked your ideas. I did like, how you were trapping, how you kind of tied everything together. And you designed these gray skulls, like the spirit of gray skulls were these scary looking things.
That was really cool.
Yeah. And you put them all together. Yeah. And I know that's not how they normally would look. And speaking of looks, I did like what you did with Filmation He-Man. Was that your idea?
Well, that was so one of the things that we had talked. We really based a lot of this on. There's one segment from I think it's from Attorney War. It might be before that, but in the DC series that Rob wrote, and there's a scene where Skeletor comes back after having been gone for a while, and he says he's traveled to all these other universes, and he saw all these other places that he saw versions of himself. So he sees and they're all done in the style of how they appeared. So even though that comic is drawn like a modern DC New 52 comic, he sees, they show this sort of montage, and you see animated He-Man or animated Skeletor, you see video game Skeletor, you see all this other stuff, and you see the toy as well. So part of the idea was well, if that's how it appeared to him, then we need to continue that here, that, in those dimensions, they appear exactly how they appeared in that universe. And then we added this idea that because everybody lost their swords, including Filmation He-Man, that when he got a new one from King He-Man, he became an animated version of the the Eternity War He-Man. So there you go. We had to combine all these different things, and Tom Derenick was the artist on that. Matt Yackey the colors. That was completely their design, and Tom was able to do that animated style so well in issue 4, and I was really excited that we got to see him, with all the other characters and in that style.
Yeah, he that was really cool. It was like a souped up Filmation He-Man. I loved it.
Yeah, and he had the sigils from the Starseed and stuff.
Yeah, seeing all these really cool designs in Multiverse makes me wonder, okay, so when are we going to see the action figures for this?
That's the part that I was just hoping for. I kept seeing this, and I was like, oh, they need to make classics. They need to make all these into classics.
Yeah.
And that's one. So and this is, I hope it doesn't come across as cynical, because I don't think of it that way. But certainly, when you work on Master Universe, your job to some degree is add new toys, right? That's the job. Because this is a toy brand. So that was a big part of it too. Was giving new toys to play with, and also like things that look like things that belong in the universe. So that's why I was really keen to use those original designs that were part of the variants and stuff. Because the parts look right, they look like He-Man parts. So I think it'd be awesome if they did some of those. Even when we did Injustice Master Universe, that was one of our plans. Was like, oh, we can do a variant figure for Shazam He-Man and all that sort of stuff. So, but again, with all things related to this brand, is Mattel and DC will do stuff if you tell them that you're super excited about it, and if enough people tell them, then they will make it. But we certainly planned this with the idea of these would make great action figures.
Yeah, well done. And I really dig the Skeletor movie costume design with Anti-Eternia He-Man. He's standing there in this red Skeletor movie armor. It's so badass.
Yeah, so that was, and that was one of the things, again, sort of tying all this shit together. In the 87 movie, Skeletor gets the powers from these he becomes a god, and so I assume that is somehow related to these dark gods, right? Like that must all be part of the same story. So when Anti-He-Man gets that, he gets a version of that, the eye of whatever opens up, and he gets that power, and he says, "I am a god," and then he does, just like that. So I assume I'm tying all the shit together. See, I know my nerd stuff, so I try to make it.
Well done. Oh yeah, and I was meaning to ask you about that same page in the upper right corner. It shows Teela, and I think there are maybe different versions of Teela.
Yeah, 3 Teelas, yeah.
Yeah, one would look like the video game Teela, and one I thought was the 2000X Teela, and then Filmation, and I guess we could say vintage Teela. And was that Spectre or?
No, it's so basically the idea is that they go to all these different universes, and that's the DC universe. So there's some kind of superhero character trying to stop the So but we didn't want to use an actual DC character because it wasn't a crossover. So, but it's just like a superhero universe essentially. So that's some cool superhero guy trying to stop an invasion of Earth. Because in the other one, you see basically what is Thundera, except it's Kid Rena's people, and they've been, so I was kind of like, I did a little sort of Thundercats crossover homage and a little Injustice crossover homage as well. So if you want to play these as all one big unit, it works because the references are all, they all line up. So you see He-Man say, "I'm going to take over all these places, including the Thundera sort of world and this or DC Universe sort of world or Injustice world."
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Yeah, I saw that and I thought, wait, those are like DC superheroes. Like they're flying and
yeah.
So yeah, makes sense. That makes sense. Oh, but yeah, you should have used Green Lantern and stuff. That'd be cool too.
I've done this stuff long enough to know, you can sort of homage things, but it'll slow you down to have to do the actual license and all that sort of stuff. So
I see.
you make it, it's obvious for the people in the know, and then, because I'm sure there's tons of DC heroes that they don't have books, right? They're just doing something in like, Portland or Miami, and they don't, that's not a city that we cover very often. So, or some fictional city that doesn't exist.
True.
So
makes sense. Well, so one thing I'm curious about is you introduce the nexus of all realities with the very cool orb of horrors. And could you give us a little explanation as to what's the difference between the nexus of all realities and the interrealm?
So I totally considered all this shit. Okay, so
well, we're putting you to the test, so let's see.
Yeah. I've got it figured out. Yeah. So the nexus is in the bowels of all Castle Grayskulls. Is this place where all the doors to all the other Castle Grayskulls exist, essentially, or all the other universes that you can go to. Mm-hmm. But the interrealm is what you walk through to get there. So it's basically like a place in between, because Anti-He-Man didn't use the Nexus. He used the sword to kind of tear a hole in reality. He was sort of had to walk on the underside of reality. So he was basically, trudging through this vast, cosmic, bizarre landscape that looks sort of like a Steve Ditko Doctor Strange design, trying to get places because he was not accessing the castles directly. He was going through, this sort of path that he had to make for himself. But I assume also we actually were going to do a scene, but I just didn't have room for it, which actually would have tied to the Injustice Masters of the Universe crossover, where when you see when Skeletor Kelder goes through the universes, you see that world, and we were going to do a thing where like basically he's passing all these other versions of himself, and we were going to do the Skeletor or Shazam character from Injustice Masters of the Universe, all these other characters, like he would see all these other versions of himself traveling, and that would have also tied it to that issue of Eternity War where we saw that Skeletor, the other Skeletor, he said he passed all these versions of himself. Then we would have seen him pass this version of himself as well. So there you go. But I didn't have room, so I didn't do it.
I see. Wow. Well, you can cover it in the Tales of the Multiverse, or from the Multiverse comic series, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Actually, I think I pitched it as I told Rob if you wanted to do it, we could do it would be just called Master of the Multiverse, the series, and it would basically, because the Cosmic Enforcers were devastated by Anti-Attorney He-Man, that like one of these Zodiacs says, okay, he basically picks a team of the He-Force guys to help him maintain peace throughout the multiverse, so they could travel to all these different places.
I see. Fantastic. Yeah, that sounds really, really cool.
Which goes to the question I was going to ask you. Now that it's finished, how did you have any scenes you wished you put in there?
I mean, I wish I could have done a lot of stuff longer. There's nothing I had to cut besides, just sort of references to stuff. It was obviously very complex as it was, and this was obviously for people who know Master Universe, but I also wanted it to be accessible, so I tried not to keep things that would be, just for people who in the know. Like, so there was definitely stuff I cut that was like a reference to something that I couldn't explain, but would have been cool to do. I mean, I would have loved to have done. There was more stuff I wanted to do on Filmation Earth. I just didn't have room for it, but I would have loved to have done something that connected to She-Ra in some way. There was like a scene I kind of had thought of that I would put into probably the Filmation one that would use She-Ra, but I just, it was just too much stuff. So in 6 issues, I feel like I probably did, I don't know, at least 10 issues worth of shit. So, but I wish I would have loved to have done more. I wanted to show more of Tapper's Grayskull He-Man's world, like how things worked there, because on his world everybody was giant, like because in the video game all the bad guys turn into giants and he's small.
Yeah.
So I
Nice.
want to do more there. I had a scene I wanted to do with an '87 movie Skeletor that I didn't get to do because I just didn't have room. So there's certainly stuff I would have loved to have done, but they're details that, like, though they'd be cool, they didn't necessarily serve anything but just being, a reference that I enjoyed.
Well, you always want to leave them wanting more, and you certainly accomplished that.
Yeah, let's hope.
And
Well,
I
that's-
can't wait to. I just wanted to say I can't wait to celebrate Orko-Halloween this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is he does say that in issue 4. He says that he wants his own holiday, and they suggest a few of them. Like there was, all New Orko's Eve or all this other stuff.
Nice.
Well, I always found it fascinating that they were all there just drinking, from straws, I guess, milkshakes. But
Yeah.
Well, because he says in the Keldor complains that when he comes from that world, he's like, everyone there's so happy, and all they just all hang around drinking milkshakes or whatever the hell they do. So I was like, you have to show them actually drinking milkshakes. It all ties together. It was mentioned.
Brilliant. I was gonna say maybe those shakes could have been from that what is that place called in the live action He-Man movie? The
chicken
ribs place.
Robbie's ribs.
Yeah,
Robbie's
they
ribs.
could have had Robbie's Ribs logos on the cups.
Yeah,
I
that's
do like
there you go.
So I was going to say, I do like the panel where you left off that there's other worlds and new worlds forming and new worlds shaping up. And, you kind of left it like there's room for more.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely wanted to set up that there's always new versions of this thing coming out. So, it's a super flexible idea. And, there's the new Netflix cartoons coming out. I mean, He-Man will outlive us all, right? I mean, that's, when I'm long gone and my daughter has kids, they'll be like playing some new Master Universe virtual reality immersive thing or some shit. And, if they'll have new versions of it, because it all these things that work for a long time have these sort of something in common, which is that they're reinventable, so you can reinvent Superman, you can reinvent Batman, you can reinvent Spider-Man, and as long as you stay true to the core, it works. You can do different, different styles and different designs, but as long as the core is there, it still works.
I'm really curious. There was the one scene where Prince Adam, the anti-Eternia Prince Adam, he's fallen to the ground, and he says it was just a lie. And there were all of these the ground was littered with He-Man swords. What was going on there?
I can't remember. It was just his, right? Because his sort of dissolved.
Right.
Yeah. We had the sword shatter, and I assumed that was all the swords he collected.
Oh, yeah, they fell out of the... Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah, there you go. So he had fused them all into his sword. When he lost his power, the swords just all fell out, yeah.
That makes sense. Very cool. And does Keldor ever get his Neosporin for his face?
Yeah. And I was thinking, like, obviously that would be a devastating injury, but I was like, well, it was done with the Starseed, so I'm sure that takes care of all the problems that you would normally have, like exposure and everything. So, we don't have to worry about that. He just has that terrible wound, and but like that's a cool idea too. Like if you have this sort of scarred prince, and then he becomes this
Mhm.
hero. Like that's cool. That's its own thing. That could totally be its own story.
Yeah.
Well, I took it that he's just living with it. It happened to him by magic, and that's why he hasn't died. Because normally in the laws of physics and every medical knowledge, yeah, he would be dead. But I just took it as a magic thing.
Yeah.
It's the magic scar. It
Yeah.
like,
Magic.
does its own sort of. It all
And so
stands-
that's
all-
why I
all
took it
logic
that-
works.
And so this is where I kind of took it that if you were to continue, that Keldor is that world's He-Man, or what would you call him?
Yeah, I was thinking about. I would just call him He-Man, I guess, but yeah, I mean, because he's another He-Man, but he would be. I mean, you guys can make up a name for it. That'd be cool with me. I mean, because obviously in his world he would be the He-Man of that world, but
Mhm.
So, but if you want to call him He-Manator or whatever, or He-Skull or He-Skell, I'm good with anything. You can make something up.
Well, I just kept thinking because in that world, He-Man would kind of be a dirty word.
That's a good
You know?
point. Yeah. True.
I mean, you notice that in our world, we don't have too many Hitlers running around.
Well, we do. They're just not named it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my
you
dark
don't-
comment for the day. But yeah, you're good. That's a
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, there's not a lot of Adolfs anymore.
Yeah.
But maybe Keldor's job is to redeem it, right? That's his thing. So now he has to make it.
Yeah.
So it could go either way. Yeah. We could.
Yeah, I just kept trying to think like He-Man would not be a popular name there. I mean,
True.
and that's
Yeah,
why
I
I
mean,
kept
but
thinking
maybe that's his whole
Skeleton
thing.
Man.
He's sort of a maybe Skeleton. There you go. But he could also be. He's kind of like the Spider-Man of that world, where he does good things, but he sort of has to do it. He's got his own J. Jonah Jameson complaining about that damn He-Man, and his brother. There you go. There's the setup for that new world. His brother doesn't agree with this He-Man running around, but he has to do it. There's your can't must hero's journey story, and so he's still doing it. And he's helping but he's kind of a rebel, and he's helping the heroic warriors and shit. And you got a good story.
There you go.
Well, that was the
Yeah.
other little nitpick I have. Do they know he's the new He-Man?
No. It has
Yeah.
Oh,
to-
he has
it
the
has to have
secret
the same story.
identity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
he
the same
still
thing.
has that secret identity motif.
Yep, and the only one that know would be Evil Lyn and Beastman and Panther. That's the only ones. So they're his Man-at-Arms and Tila of that world. Or well, Tila didn't know, but Man-at-Arms did and Sorceress did. So they're basically his Sorceress and Man-at-Arms.
I love how you've got, Keldor has his Screech, and Thor. I mean, it's just, it's this well-rounded gang. Yeah, very cool. Screech is kind of like the bat signal.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And I really want to use that toy was always a favorite of mine as a kid. The color scheme was so cool, and I always wanted to use Screech for something because it's not, it doesn't have a real. I mean, in the cartoon it was like a robot, and it was never used really in anything else. So, but I figured this would be my opportunity to give Screech a function.
Yeah.
Well- No, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to point out that I kind of got that from the Point Dread, book. That's the only time I saw Soar fly over and call He-Man,
Yeah.
and then fly off. And I thought that was almost like a tribute to it. That's how I took it.
For sure. Oh yeah. I mean, I think I remember the most. I've rewatched the 2000 era cartoon and Filmation cartoon stuff. I've rewatched those since I saw them originally, but the stuff I remember without having to reread it is the original mini comics and the original books. Because when I was a kid, that's what we would just read that stuff until it fell apart. So like my version of Master Universe is definitely very much distilled from the comics and the books that it came with. So especially that era of comics that's like the one that introduces Triclops, the one that introduces Trapjaw, the Gary Cohn and Mark Texiera ones. Like those that's my version of Master Universe is pretty much that in my head. So just because that's the stuff like we watched the cartoons and stuff, but we devoured those comics.
And I just wanted to get some final thoughts on this. If you had to do this a little differently, would there be some things you would have changed now that it's all said and done? Are you 100% happy with your, with this story?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I'm not bashing it.
I
I'm just
planned
asking because
No,
there's always
totally.
a creator saying, I would love to do this, or I would have, changed something a little. Even J.K. Rowling said she would have made Harry Potter have a love interest with Hermione, but.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I planned this one really very. I mean, I think sometimes when I work on some things, it looks like I don't have a plan, but it's like I do actually. And to this, I knew what the ending was. Like I knew all those little sort of parts had to come together. I knew, from the beginning that I wanted Panther to become Battle Panther, but I knew that I wanted to be that he didn't like Keldor. Like all those little parts, I knew what I wanted to do with, even though I write comics monthly, so every month I have to write the story. It's unique way of writing things is that you're planning things in your head, but you don't really know where you're gonna be until you get there. So, but yeah, I feel like it would have been nice to have more room. I guess I wish I had an extra couple of issues. But that, that's kind of always how I feel about comics is that, it's just hard to contain all the things I want to do in only 120 pages. So, but mostly I got it in there. Yeah, I'm pretty happy.
Well, it was solid. I gotta give you credit on that. It had, after seeing the 6 issues, and again, there was times where I kept thinking, okay, where are you going with this? What are you gonna do? I did feel like the Filmation one kind of went off the rails, but in a good way. With the murder and the clown.
Yeah,
and
but it had to be. It had to be
yeah.
You had to see for a while that you're like, wait, this is really twisted, and then we brought it back, and then I had to make you think I might not though. I had to mess with you a little bit.
Yeah, and you did. You fully went off and you messed around with everything, and I really appreciate that. Honestly, I have to say that ended up being one of my favorite issues. And the Savage Land ended up being one of my favorite issues. And this one, I got to say, you wrapped it up pretty well with an opener. You kind of left it open to continue, and we can continue in this anti-universe. We can do other things. And so, would you continue this?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, it's certainly set up to be. It could go in a couple different directions. We could do a story set in Anti-Eternia with, around Keldor He-Man and make the kind of he's a guy trying to clean up this sort of destroyed world, but all these problems and we could also do a story with, like I said, the sort of exiles / sliders. Universe jumping characters. We could do the He Force with that. There's tons of directions we could go with it, and it was designed like that on purpose, to be something that's open ended. It could be so many different things. But I that version of Keldor, I kind of totally fell in love with. Skeletor is always one of my favorite villains, anyway. And then to make this sort of conflicted. Keldor that also he's kind of in on the joke, he knows that this is kind of goofy and is okay, that kind of really resonated with me because in the end he ends up really sort of embracing all this shit. So I love that character. I would love to do more with him. It's it kind of feels like its own thing, like this sort of evil evil potential wizard guy becoming this sort of sword swinging hero is its own thing. Really, it could be its own toy line. I would love to do something with that. I thought there was tons of potential. We set up a little couple things in there. When you see in the beginning the royal palace, you see I don't know if it got drawn in there. I think so. But we had there were statues of Chakotay and some other characters. I was like, oh, there's all this history then, because this world, is a little bit on its edge. So some of those characters were good guys and they were fighting against previous versions, and we could do a Hordak of Anti-Eternia and Anti-Etheria, and there's all kinds of shit we could do that I totally had ideas for that we set up. So yes, I would love to do more if everybody would tell Mattel and DC they want more, then maybe we'll get that.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention that because it's now been announced that the publisher Come On is giving us a Masters of the Universe board game. That company has been making comic books for its board games. And so just throwing that out there that, hey, maybe you can get in touch with them. And if they decide they want to make a comic book version of their board game, then you could write a story for that.
There we go. Yeah, that's cool. I think, DC's got more plans for something in the future. I'm not exactly sure what the immediate future is, but, I think it's been 8 years of Master Universe Comics at DC, and I think it's they've done a great job, and the crossover things are cool. The Eternity War stuff, that whole unit of story is really contained. It kind of righted itself after a sort of shaky start, and there's tons of potential, I think, with that stuff. And as long as people, I think years, as long as things don't completely implode in this country, I think they'll be big for Master Universe. There'll be 2 cartoons. There'll probably be new toy line. She-Ra was a very big hit, a critical hit as well. There's lots of potential still for this brand.
Right. Absolutely.
Well,
it's a challenging time.
That's a shame. I felt that we didn't get to see. I mean, I felt She-Ra would have been cool in this.
Oh, I would have loved to do it.
Yeah.
It's just it's just so much more stuff to figure out. The logistics and the characters, and there's so many characters in this already, and it was I would have loved to. It would have been, but it was just, that's a whole nother angle that I just didn't have room for. But
I just kept on, do more.
Yeah.
Well, and the Hordak relationship would be interesting, because if we were in Anti-Eternia, then, Hordak comes there. Well, he would be obviously their relationship in other places is that Keldor was a student of Hordak. But in this, their relationship would be vastly different. There's tons of story we could do.
Well, hey, and I wanted to mention briefly that, your writing is inspiring, and I mentioned before that, it has inspired me to start a new comic book series, little picture book mini comic series called Masters of the Universe: The Age of Wondar, and I've been working on that with Rene, and so I wanted to I just wanted to thank you for and in working on that, it's introduced me to Robert E. Howard and these other iconic writers, and it's opened up a whole new world. So I can't thank you enough, Tim.
Oh yeah, anytime. And that's cool, because I think like I said, that's one of the greatest advantages of this brand is it inspires all these other stories, right? That's what it's meant for. So that's it's a mishmash of a lot of things, and that's great that you're going back to Howard and all this other stuff, because obviously there's lots of influences from that kind of thing on Master Universe. So very cool.
And we again want to say thank you for this journey you took us on. I mean, you really created an amazing story here, and I said this before with the artists. and with you a couple of times that if there's a Hall of Fame for Masters of the Universe, you definitely need to be on it. For contributing this amazing story.
Well, I appreciate it. I try. I mean, just need to work on this in various ways over the last, I think, 5-6 years. I've been working on Master Universe stuff. It's a great honor. We did the art book, and then my brother and I worked on the She-Ra cartoon. We did the brand Bible, and then doing this stuff. So, I don't have to do any research. I already know all this shit, so it's easy for me to just roll into it, and I can turn around and use the money I made on Master Universe to buy action figures. So, yeah.
So, what are you working on?
Oh, I got too much. Two of the things I'm working on haven't been announced. They're original graphic novels. I got lucky just because, before the big shutdown, I'd signed a deal to do 2 original book stuff. So that stuff was going forward, even though the other stuff was on lockdown. So I'm doing those, and I have some DC work coming up, 2 stories, and what else am I doing? I have Vampire the Masquerade from Vault. I'm doing the monthly comic book adaptation of the role-playing game, and my book Money Shot is still coming out. We were on a little break because of the shutdown, but we're coming back in July with issue 6, which is inadvertently and accidentally highly relatable. And I wrote it back in November, but I accidentally predicted some shit, so that'll be interesting when that comes out. And Dark Red, I'm still working on that from Aftershock. And I have a new book coming out from Aftershock soon, which I think people will dig on. So, lots of stuff.
And where can we follow you?
I am on Twitter as @Hackin' Tim Seeley. I am on Instagram as @Tim Seeley. I am on those 2. And then I also have a DeviantArt site, and my website is timseeleycreative.com.
All right. We want to thank you. Thank you again. It was a wonderful experience with you. And hopefully, again, this is not the end for you and working on Masters of the Universe comic books.
Yeah, and just, the thing stands. If you like stuff like this, you just have to tell Mattel and DC, because they don't know unless they hear from you guys. So, let them know. And
then come back here so we can talk about it.
Yeah, would love to.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Tim Seeley for joining us again. And for all the latest Masters of the Universe news, please check out he-man.org. And until next time, good journey.
I'm Rene. I'd like to thank Tim Seeley for joining us, and again for the 6 wonderful issues of Masters of the Universe. Looking forward to more Masters of the Universe goodness from Mattel and Netflix and Kevin Smith. Until next time, be sure to catch the latest nerd news on Nerds on the Couch. And so until next time, good journey.
This is David Clark, owner of AdultCollector.org. It's a challenging time we live in, but fortunately we have lots of fantastic Masters of the Universe things to look forward to and to enjoy. And I wanted to just quickly invite everybody to check out the new Facebook page for the Masters of the Universe board game and join the Masters of the Universe board game fans group. Good journey, guys.
And this is Sean, and I just wanted to say thanks for having me back, and good journey, guys.
If you liked what you heard, please remember to subscribe to stay up to date with all of our podcasts. Like this video and hit the bell to be notified when we upload new content. This has been a production of Nerds on the Couch. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter in association with AdultCollector.org. You can find them on Facebook. Good journey.